We have all felt those days where every light turns green. The right person calls at the exact moment you think of them. Ideas arrive without effort. We usually call this luck. But then there are the other days, the days where every door seems locked and every step feels like walking through deep water. You might assume these are just random cycles of life. But what if these moments are actually data points? Have you ever noticed how a single, tiny decision can suddenly flip the script? One moment you are struggling, and the next, the entire atmosphere of your life has changed. This isn't a gradual improvement of your circumstances. It is a total departure from one reality into another. Most of us are crossing these invisible borders without ever realizing how we got there. Think back to a time when you made a sudden, firm decision. Perhaps it was walking away from a draining situation or finally committing to a long-held passion. In that moment, did you notice how the world seemed to rearrange itself almost instantly? The heavy resistance you had been fighting for months simply evaporated. This isn't just a change in your mood. It is a repeatable pattern that many of us overlook because we are taught that progress must be slow and difficult. We often dismiss these flashes of effortless flow as mere coincidences. However, something strange happens when we look closer at these moments of alignment. The obstacles that seemed like solid walls suddenly become irrelevant.
This raises a pressing question. Why does the flow vanish just as quickly as it arrives? It suggests that we are interacting with a hidden mechanism we don't yet fully understand. Watch closely, because the principle behind this shift is far simpler than most people imagine. We often categorize our lives into good phases and bad phases. On some days, the world feels like a mirror of your best intentions. You think of a solution, and the resource appears within hours. You take a small step, and it leads to a giant leap. We usually dismiss this as a lucky streak. But then the momentum stops. Suddenly, every task requires double the effort. Small misunderstandings turn into major conflicts. You might feel like you are pushing against an invisible wall that wasn't there yesterday. This is the strange consistency many people notice. These cycles of flow and friction don't seem to correlate with how hard we work. They seem to correlate with something else entirely. Have you ever noticed how these shifts often follow a specific internal shift in your perspective? The repetition begins to reveal something deeper. It suggests that these aren't just random emotional states or bouts of good fortune. This is where the pattern becomes clear. We aren't just moving through a fixed world. We are moving through a series of versions of it. We call it luck or bad timing because we haven't yet seen the mechanism that governs the transition.
This is where the experience begins to make sense. We have been taught to view reality as a solid, unchangeable landscape that we must work hard to traverse. But the patterns of flow and friction suggest a different truth. The teaching is simpler than most people expect. Reality is not a single timeline. It is a vast collection of parallel versions of your life, all existing simultaneously. You do not change the world. You change yourself. And in doing so, you shift into a world of the world that already exists. This reveals something important about how reality works. Your state of being is not a reaction to your life. It is the frequency that determines which timeline you inhabit. When you feel that sudden alignment, you aren't just having a good day. You have literally shifted your perspective into a reality where things are designed to work. Suddenly, the pattern becomes easier to understand. The shifts you have felt throughout your life were not accidents of fate. They were moments where your internal compass briefly aligned with a different version of the world. Why would your internal state have such power? It suggests that we are not passive observers, but active navigators of a hidden map. To understand how this shift happens, we have to look at how we navigate through time. Imagine a film reel. Each individual frame is static and unchanging. Motion only appears when the projector moves through those frames at a specific speed. Reality operates in a similar way. This reveals the hidden rule behind the experience. You aren't changing your world any more than a radio changes the music in the air. You are simply tuning your frequency to a different broadcast. This explains why the pattern behaves this way. When you follow your highest excitement, you are essentially adjusting your internal dial to match the frequency of a specific timeline. Think of it like a GPS system. The destination already exists on the map. The moment you change your internal state, the system recalculates your route. This mechanism has been operating in your life the entire time, even in the moments you felt most lost. When you experience friction or bad luck, it is often just the signal that you are trying to find a specific result on the wrong frequency. Suddenly, the shift begins to make sense. You don't have to build the better timeline. You only have to become the version of yourself that lives there. If the mechanism is so simple, why do we find ourselves stuck in the same cycles of resistance? The answer lies in how we interpret our own internal signals. We have been conditioned to believe that life must be a struggle to be valid. This is where the inner voice begins to argue. When you feel a spark of excitement, a protective part of your mind immediately intervenes with a list of reasons why it isn't realistic. We often mistake this resistance for wisdom or responsibility. We tell ourselves we are being cautious when we are actually just clinging to the frequency of the familiar. This is the moment excitement gets replaced by doubt. How many times has caution silenced the signal of your own intuition? By choosing the safe, logical path over the one that actually moves your spirit, you are unintentionally locking yourself into the old timeline. You are choosing the static frame you already know over the one that contains the breakthrough. This inner friction acts like a brake on your momentum. If you have ever noticed yourself talking your way out of a moment of flow, you aren't alone. I'm curious if you've ever felt that signal and ignored it, only to realize later that the impulse was right. Despite the noise of doubt, there is a very precise way to begin navigating toward a better timeline. It doesn't require a massive life overhaul. It only requires a different way of responding to your internal signals. This is where the navigation begins. The formula is a simple three-part loop. First, look at the options available to you right now, and choose the one that carries even the slightest bit more excitement than the others. Second, act on that excitement to the best of your ability, using every resource you have. Third, and most importantly, do this with zero attachment to what the result should look like. This is how the signal becomes action.
The formula works because excitement is the thread that connects you to the version of yourself already living in that better timeline. When you follow it, you are essentially telling the mechanism to stay on that frequency. How different would a day feel if you followed the signal instead of the fear? Remember, this process works best when followed with curiosity rather than pressure. It is an exploration, not a chore. If this perspective resonates with you, consider subscribing for more explorations like this. If this idea helped you see something differently, leave a like so more people can discover it. The change rarely starts with something dramatic. It usually begins with a quiet curiosity that feels almost insignificant. Imagine you are working on a routine task when you suddenly feel a small impulse to visit a local bookstore you haven't thought about in months. Your mind might argue that it's a waste of time, but instead of listening to the doubt, you follow the signal. While browsing the aisles, you run into an old colleague who mentions a project that perfectly matches your skills. This is often how the shift begins. A single, simple action based on a spark of interest places you in the right room at the exact right moment. You might have dismissed similar moments in your own life as mere coincidence, but in reality, that small impulse was the navigation system recalculating your path. How many times has a small decision changed the entire direction of your day?
When you act on that tiny spark, you are no longer fighting the current of the old timeline. You are stepping into the flow of a version of reality where the connections you need are already waiting for you. The signal appears in these ordinary situations because that is where your life actually happens. This suggests something remarkable about the nature of reality. We have spent this journey looking at how small decisions shift our daily experience. But when we step back, the pattern reveals a deeper meaning. It implies that you are never actually stuck in a single life path. Instead, you are moving through a multi-dimensional map where every possible version of your story is already written and waiting. This changes the way we understand the experience of choice. Your excitement is not just a random emotion. It is a sophisticated guidance system designed to help you navigate this map. It is the language of your broader consciousness, whispering which direction holds the version of reality you most desire. Could these signals be guiding us toward versions of ourselves we have not yet explored? You may already be standing at the threshold of this realization in your own life. When you recognize that reality is this flexible, the pressure to create a future disappears. It is replaced by the wonder of discovering which future you will choose to inhabit. The better timeline isn't something you have to build through sheer force. It is a destination that is already there, waiting for you to simply tune in. Perhaps the signal has been there all along, waiting beneath the noise of a busy mind. The shift into a better timeline does not require you to force the world to change. It begins with the quiet courage to trust a single spark of interest. Sometimes the shift begins simply by noticing the patterns of flow and friction that have always been present in your day. As you move forward, you may find that the signals of your own excitement become clearer and the coincidences more frequent. The pattern may already be unfolding around you, guiding you toward a version of yourself you are only just beginning to meet. How might your life change if you began listening more closely to that subtle internal compass? If you're curious about the deeper mechanics behind this signal, the video appearing on screen dives into the mystery of how your beliefs specifically shape the path ahead. It is the next chapter in understanding how you navigate the infinite map of your own reality.